I think I'll call this meeting to order. I'm Councilmember Jose Huizar. This is a joint Public Works, Budget and Finance Committee meeting. I'm the Chair of Public Works. Bernard Parks is the Chair of Budget and Finance. We are joined today by Koretz, Rosenthal, and Englander, and we were told that Cardenas will be joining us soon. Before we go on into our two items, which we will take together, why don't we do this? I have the clerk read the two items into the record, please.
Okay, item number 1 is an item continued from July 20, 2011. It's a Bureau of Street Services and City Attorney reports and a revised draft ordinance relative to amending the Los Angeles Municipal Code in connection with a point-of-sale plan for sidewalk repair and related matters. Item number 2 is a Bureau of Street Services, City Attorney reports and draft ordinance relative to amending LAMC Section 62.104, subsection E, to repeal the exception that established city liability for repair of curbs, driveways, and sidewalks due to tree root damage and related matters.
Thank you very much. And as many of you know, we had a joint meeting on these subjects back in July, and at that time, we decided to continue the collaboration of the two committees until we could come up with some recommendations on dealing with our sidewalks and have those recommendations go on to the full council for review. In July, the committee focused on identifying what the main issues were. We were briefed by street services that current status of city sidewalks is that we have about 11,000 miles of sidewalk, an estimated 4,000 miles of which need repair, and that currently liability costs for the city range somewhere in the area of $4 to $6 million each year for the city. And finally, that the estimated cost to fix all damaged sidewalks citywide is somewhere between $1.2 and $1.5 billion. At the time, we only had a draft from Bureau of Street Services on what various options were for the committees to undertake. During the discussion, we decided to continue the items so that we could get some additional information on some of those items, and we voted at the time, and by majority vote, we are here. We decided to continue it, and we are here today to continue that discussion. We have a report by Bureau of Street Services. You have two items on there. One was on the 7 options, correct? And the other was on the different types of materials that we can use as we move forward. Let's hold off on the material discussion for now. If we could only deal with the 7 options and focus on that first. Depending on how long that takes, we may or may not get into that second part of the report. That would be my suggestion. And secondly, my suggestion would be that hopefully after today, after a discussion I had with Bureau of Street Services, they suggested that they would love to go back and give us any more additional information on any one of these options, but they are reluctant right now just to start work on an ordinance without our committees giving them direction, and they don't want to spend too much time on any one option when it's not the one that's going to be forwarded to full council. So hopefully, what I'm hoping to do today is come up with some options, whatever those may be, out of the 7, to send to the full council, to ask the departments to further look into this, get them back into committee, and then send to full council with an ordinance. But for right now, hopefully what we can get out of today's discussion is a narrowing down of all those options. So with that, I'll call the departments up, I'm going to ask Mr. Parks if he would like to have some opening comments as well.
Thank you very much, Mr. Huizar. I would just like creating the motion in 2005 to begin to look at this issue, that we come out of this committee with a couple of things, this joint committee. Number 1, I think as we had a briefing recently in closed session, it's absolutely essential that we have an ordinance that vacates the current ordinance that makes the city liable for sidewalks that are broken by trees, that we then create some pathway to cause communities to begin to look at ways in which they can effectively fix their sidewalks that are deteriorating at a rapid rate. And I think also because we have at least 6 votes on these two committees, I would hope that we also would look at giving some direction to street services to put in place for next year's budget the recreation of their inspection and permit team so that we could get that funded, and it would be phase one of actually beginning to start a process to have the city invest in how sidewalks will be fixed in the future. And so I hope we have several things that we can come out of this hearing for, because what I've seen in watching this for the last several years is that I don't think our option is to do nothing, and I think the public, whether they agree or disagree on the process, has an expectation that someone is going to fix their sidewalks, and the only way that we can do that is show leadership in a way in which they can be done. Someone mentioned at our last meeting that we've allowed since '72 people to believe that the city's responsible. And I think if we go back, we'll find there was a longer period when the community was responsible before '72, in which they were the only responsibility for their sidewalks. So I'd hope we'd have several things that we can come out of and look forward to an incremental step in getting our sidewalks in good repair.
Okay. Good. Well, with that, let's ask the Bureau to give a brief presentation on your report, and maybe start off with what your recommendations are. You pretty much, asked us to come up with 1 or 3 options you could pursue, and secondly, if we move in the direction to change the responsibility and liability for fixing sidewalks, if that is an option, that we give you that direction as well. But and then we could go through each one of the 7 options and have a discussion as to which direction we will go. We'll open it up to public comment. I have a number of public speaking cards here after the committee asks some questions, and then for further discussion, we'll have the public comment, and then we'll have further discussion. But if you want to, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon, council members. Ron Olive, Assistant Director with the Bureau of Street Services, along with
Ted Jordan, Assistant City Attorney and Public Works General Counsel.
And thank you for setting up the item and putting it all in perspective for us. The options on our latest report are spelled out in a little bit different format. We think it's a little clearer. It kind of combines some of the sub-options into main options. But beginning on page 2, as you mentioned, Mr. Huizar, there are 7 options that we've identified. The first option really is to repeal the limited exception ordinance, i.e. the ordinance that was adopted by the city in 1973, I believe it was, to make the city responsible for sidewalk damage due to street tree root growth. This would allow the adoption of the attachment A, the ordinance city attorney report, which would remove that limited exception. And then we have the options of either having a full citywide enforcement program, or a program. Some programs are a little more manageable. We can phase out over a longer period of time. A complaint-driven program, an enforcement program just along major secondary highways, commercial corridors, if you will, focusing on locations where we've received sidewalk trip and fall claims, and we spell out some projections on what that might be for a 1 to 5 year program. A smaller amount would be focusing on sidewalk trip and fall claims that have turned into lawsuits, i.e. greater injury. And any combination of these with a 50-50 voluntary sidewalk program, if the city so chose to join in and partner with the residents. The second option would also be to repeal the limited exception, but have no enforcement program at this time, or for some period of time we'll have a moratorium on that. And we really didn't identify any details with that option. Thirdly, this is kind of a new one. We discussed, I believe, last meeting, but and we haven't fully fleshed out all the issues with this, but it would be, again, after the exception was removed, to seek reimbursement. The city would go ahead and make the repairs, but then seek reimbursement from homeowners or business insurance companies for the work, since they are responsible after the exception were lifted. Number 4, something we've reported on in the past and gone into some great depth in identifying what these programs would take, is a combination of a point of sale when a home is sold or property is sold, point of service, which would be on the buyer, and the utilities, the services would not be turned on until the sidewalk were repaired or funding were provided to the city, or a point of permit, which would mean some threshold, some level of permit from the Department of Building Safety that would trigger an inspection and a requirement to fix the sidewalk. And again, any combination of these with the 50 for 50 program, if that was the decision. Number 5, again, we go into some discussion here, but we really haven't identified all of the issues or all of the legalities with establishing some sort of sidewalk repair assessment districts. Again, what parts of the city, as we understand it, the assessment districts don't have to be contiguous, but they have to have some kind of common benefit. So properties that don't have any sidewalk damage, how do you exclude them? So we'd have to spend a lot of time with our partners from the Bureau of Engineering to identify how this could be done, along with the city attorney's office. Number 6, really, and I think the CEO's already started looking into some of the issues related with various bonds that might be initiated. Street services, we don't really have any expertise here, but there was an effort in 1998, Proposition JJ, where a bond addressing curb ramps and sidewalks was introduced, and it actually was voted on, but it was turned down. So we do have some precedent on that. But again, there's a lot of new issues that have come up that we're not that familiar with. We'd have to do quite a bit of research there. And number 7, lastly, is the only one that recommends not adopting the limited exception ordinance repeal, and basically stay under the current policy of responding to service requests, or as we're known of substandard conditions, making interim asphalt repairs and making locations as safe and passable as we can with asphalt repairs. So that's kind of the main recommendation or options we've identified. We also went into some discussion about what we call remedial type treatments, and these really would be if the ordinance for repealing the exception were not adopted. We talk about some kind of right tree, right place tree strategy, trying to, over a long period of time, again, replacing some of the older trees that have really reached their useful life and replacing them with the right size or the right type tree per location. We've had a sidewalk grinding program in the past. We had it funded for 1 year. And for, I believe it was $1 million, we had 13 staff people. We made safe almost 20,000 locations with that program. For 1 year, we did have it. Another example of this, the 12th Council District provided $100,000 of discretionary funding, and we ground down, made safe about 10,000 locations. Very efficient program. It was concentrated in one area, so we did make those repairs for about $10 a location. We mentioned ramping in here. This is another idea where we don't necessarily have to remove the damaged concrete sidewalk, and we can use asphalt or other material to ramp over the damage without having to cut the tree roots or remove the trees. And then the rest of the report goes into the materials, which we'll postpone for now.
Okay, thank you very much. And again, I want to remind everyone that all these options, none of them are mutually exclusive. We could take several options as different means of approaching how we address our huge sidewalk problems. So we don't have to go with one or to go 2 or 3. It all depends on if they fit. I think the benefit of asking our staff to dig deeper into any one of these options and for them to come back is to get a more comprehensive look, like, well, okay, would it look like if we do 1 and 3 or 2 and 4, or 1 and 4, and just you get a different sense of how much of the problem we're addressing. What does that look like? So again, none of these options are mutually exclusive. We could take several of them. Any questions or comments from committee? time?
I have some questions after public comment.
Okay, yeah, we'll take public comment at this time, and then we'll go back to discussion.
And as you look through all of these that you recommended, are they the type of things that incrementally that you could put on a time schedule and say, here's, this program could move here, it's compatible with phase 2, and this is a phase 3, or, because as finances are, none of them will all get done at the same time. But have you identified, other than, it appears that the ordinance issue is primary in most of your responses, but what are some of the steps in all of this combination that have some priority that becomes a building block?
Mr. Chairman, I'd just like to clarify, option number 7 can be implemented immediately.
Yeah.
So moved.
Councilman Parks, we try to identify and project, for instance, the claims and the lawsuits based on how many we've been receiving on average. So I believe, this again would be a very long term, and we would never get to the 4,000 miles in any timely fashion. But for instance, if we were going to look at all the claim locations, we might be looking at a 5-year program, 10,000 locations we can mitigate. It's a lot. It probably would take a lot of inspection staff, a lot of administrative staff, a lot of thinking about, if the owner doesn't comply, what do we do then? I think the city would then have to take action, impose a lien on the property.
Would there be a source of revenue created by the permits and things of that nature?
We haven't really come up with that, but certainly, certainly we would think you would have to put a surcharge on those to, again, capture all your overhead costs and the, the administrative costs to manage the program.
Thank you.
Mr. England, do you want to?
I know we're about to go into public comment on this, and I have a lot of questions, but just on that front, just now, I'm trying to figure out what you just suggested on the math. Not following your math on page 3, 1D, as it relates to 2,000 related claims filed each year. So that would assume a 3-year program would consider 6,000 locations, whereas a 5-year program would consider 10,000 locations. The math to me doesn't seem right. I would assume that there's a lot of claims at the same locations. This doesn't not take that under consideration. In fact, many of them are duplicative.
Well, this is rough, but if you, 2,000, it varies greatly, but.
It varies greatly.
Yeah, I mean,
so
if we were going to try to.
same thing on the lawsuits.
Right, certainly. Again, this was just trying to throw something out that.
I know, I get that, but I just wanted for clarity that these aren't, the numbers are just what they are, just thrown out.
Yes,
They're not.
yes. They're approximation, very approximate, yes.
Very, okay.
Okay, thank you. We'll go to public comment now. And as a reminder, the public speakers, we are taking items 1 and 2 together, so you may want to address both items as we call you up. Jack Allen,
2 minutes per person. Is that what you guys do?
Nancy Friedman,
2 minutes per person.
2 minutes per person, yes. Jack Allen and Nancy Friedman.
Thank you for appearing here. I'm Jack Allen. I'm president of the Palisades Preservation Association. I also am the area representative on the community council that represents an area that would be heavily affected by this, because our area is one of those areas where a lot of the wrong trees were planted in the wrong places. Eucalyptus and ash, and they have just torn up sidewalks, and this issue goes back before 1970, I can tell you. And we've had little success in getting them sidewalks repaired. We're often frustrated because the city won't let us do anything about the tree roots. And they say, well, the trees belong to us, and you can't do anything to those trees. I mean, when a gas meter gets broken up or a water meter gets broken up, pipeline, the property owner can't say, well, go out and cut the tree roots that are causing the damage. You have to get a permit from the city. So we don't have any control over what's happening here. But what I would like to ask is, you've given us now a new report with 7 options, and we really haven't had a chance to go back to our community councils and our associations to find out how they feel about this. And I'd like to see this hauled over another month so that we can have time to look at this and look at the various options. Naturally, option number 7 is the preferable one, but that's probably not going to happen. Top of my head, I would say we probably would want a point of sale or service, but we object to a point of permit. It takes $20,000 just to repair a roof. So it's going to happen very frequently that we would now end up having to pay not only $20,000, but a lot more to fix up a sidewalk because we'd have to take a tree out. And that's...
Thank you.
When staff comes back, please respond to Mr. Allen's point about the trees and when they were planted and the roots and all of that issue there. It is a big issue in my district, is the roots of the trees, which frankly are responsible for everything we got, more or less, when it comes to sidewalks.
My turn. Nancy Friedman, I'm from the Brentwood Community Council, I'm the chairman, and I'm delivering a letter today from the West Side Regional Alliance of Councils, which is 13 councils on the west side of Los Angeles. We had sent a letter to the mayor in January, and one of our major concerns is that the sidewalk damage caused by roots from trees in the public parkway is beyond the control of adjacent property owners. And property owners, in most cases, have not planted the offending trees and are not permitted to remove them. And that type of a situation needs to be addressed. Interestingly enough, there was an article in the New York Times today about planting 1 million trees and what do you do with them once you plant them. And they were saying that, and I thought these were probably good suggestions that you might think about in handling this program. They have people who are adopting trees and taking care of a tree, and if you don't want to take the tree down, you can do the sidewalk work and then keep the tree. Are people allowed to cut down a tree if they don't want it? That's going to be a problem where people would just rather get rid of the tree than have to keep dealing with sidewalk work. And let me just get it. Does this get passed on to the buyer of a new home, or is the seller responsible before the home is sold? Some of those problems were of concern, and I think it might be a good idea to get an emotional connection to trees. It said so in this article. If you learn to like a tree, you want to take care of the tree. And I think they have corps of people who actually go out. They train people to cut the trees. You're not allowed on a ladder, but you can cut lower branches. I think a lot of that stuff could be incorporated to make it a positive example rather than negative. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speakers are Glenn Bailey and Dr. Tom Williams.
Good afternoon. My name is Glenn Bailey. I'm Area 1 representative on the Encino Neighborhood Council. I am speaking as an individual. However, the Encino Neighborhood Council did previously vote earlier this year to oppose the draft ordinance as drafted, primarily because of the onerous burden that it would place on property owners in terms of the limited time frame for the notice, also using only the approved list of city contractors requirement, and also because of if they don't make the improvements in 90 days, that the city would then come and do it and add a 40% administrative fee. 40% is rather a high amount, especially when you look at the list of the other cities. One major city there, they had a 10% administrative fee. Why is the city charging 40%? You know, for 60 years, before the change in the early 70s, it was the property owner's responsibility. For 40 years, it's been the city's responsibility. I would argue the city has not kept up its responsibility during those past 40 years, and I would also argue that most of the trees were planted, the trees causing the problem were planted before that 40-year period, and the problem has been allowed to grow worse. There were alternatives mentioned at your July meeting that have not really been addressed. And part of that is because there's been no community outreach. There's been no outreach to the neighborhood councils on this issue, unlike issues like the DWP rate increases or the sanitation fee increase. there's been no outreach. And the 2007 subcommittees that were appointed, there's not one representative of neighborhood council on these committees. So we need to go back to the drawing board. The suggestions of like possibly using decomposed granite in some areas would allow us to preserve the trees and yet allow flexibility, if you will, on the sidewalks. And that may work in certain neighborhoods. But this is not just about sidewalks. This is about damaged curbs and damaged driveways, all of which is $3,500 to $7,000 estimated expense on average to a homeowner. $3,500 to $7,000 in these economic times with the real estate industry as it is a huge unfair burden. And please reject this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The last speakers are Barry Weiss. Oh, I'm sorry, we have Dr. Williams up here, but we can call Barry Weiss up, also Stephen Resnick, and Carrie Brazeman. Those are the last speakers.
Dr. Tom Williams, LA 32 Neighborhood Council Board Member, but I think I'm representing quite a few of the other board members. Personally, I have no stake in it. My street doesn't have any sidewalks, so we're kind of exempt on that side of it for a while. We have curbs, we have driveways, yeah, but they were all built by us, and most of the people have assumed responsibility for that. Responsibility and liability. Even if you fix the sidewalks, the liability remains the property owners. That's an interesting concept because the streets, the curbs, the driveways, and the sidewalks are public thoroughfares, and they were built usually by the city to the city's specifications, and most of the street trees were planted by the city. Therefore, whose responsibilities are they? The property owners? We're now reassigning the property owners. But it's a public area, and enforceably a public area. We can't park on the sidewalk. Well, if it was ours, we could probably park on it. So there seems to be a confusion between, the cost of repairing the sidewalks, driveways, and curbs, and the liability. If we have no input to the liability issues, i.e. it has to be done by city standard drawings, how can we assume the liability for something that we have no control over? So there's an issue there. The 90 days, well, if you give it 90 days, who's liable for any injuries of trips and falls during that 90-day period? Thank you.
Thank you. Barry Weiss, Stephen Resnick, and Carrie Brazeman.
Hi, my name is Barry Weiss. I'm here to speak on behalf of the Studio City Residents Association. We have a membership of over 1,400 families. The SCRA commends the Bureau of Street Services for their report, and we believe it addresses thoroughly the issues and concerns that were raised in the last joint committee meeting. The conclusion on page 13 implies that the most prudent way to go is to have keep the city responsible for maintaining its public thoroughfares. Let's end this discussion. The SCRA wants to keep things the way they are. There should be no changes to the ordinances, especially that would place the responsibility on property owners and with the cost and burden of making costly repairs. Throughout his report, it's clear that any changes making property owners responsible for sidewalk will cost the city money. The city would have to hire new staff for inspection and enforcement, contract administration, assessment, debt management, and general administration support. Furthermore, in light of the proposed ACE ordinance, making sidewalk repairs the responsibility of the property owners will escalate city administration enforcement costs and opens the gateway to neighbor against neighbor disputes. Voters made it clear in 1998 they don't want to pay for sidewalk repairs. They voted down the bond measure then. They won't approve it now. With the economy still in recession, unemployment at an all-time high, with no end in sight, homeowner equity almost wiped out, can you really expect homeowners to take from their retirement and the education funds for their kids to pay for sidewalk repairs? Finally, it's important to point out that the study after study shows fixed sidewalks do not improve property values. Trip and fall lawsuits will continue whether or not sidewalks are in perfect condition. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Stephen Resnick, President of the Westwood Homeowners Association and also Secretary of the Westwood Neighborhood Council. I think everyone loves trees, but I think everyone will not love trees so much if we move too fast on this. As my neighbor did across the street when she rebuilt her house, she cut down one of the trees in front of her house and then got a permit after the fact. I did some research into that and found that out. She said she had a permit, but that wasn't true. And I think much more of that will go on unless we take first things first, which is dealing with the trees and with the root problem. And I think as other comments have been made, these are difficult economic times, and I think from my reading, the chances of a recession, us going back to recession, are stronger than they have been. And I think to put this burden on property owners at this time is wrong. There are too many people. We all know people whose houses are worth less than what they bought them for. And the last thing they need in that situation, trying to deal with their finance company and make up payments, is to deal with an assessment to fix their sidewalks within 2 weeks, now changed to 90 days. I think also that how are we going to fund some of these things we're doing? We discussed that in a hearing yesterday with the sign ordinance, that there's many of you have made motions in city council over that, and there's no way for planning to work with them because the funds aren't there. And I would say we need to look at this also and see how to do this. So again, I would ask that we go a little slower. We make notice to everyone. I'm not aware in the year that my neighborhood council has been in existence that they're aware of this at all. And whose fault it is, I don't know. But I would think more notice and a little slower. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hello, Kerry Braisman, LA Neighbors United. I'm sick, so I'm going to be very, very short. Plus, my views and our views are pretty well known. Just a couple of quick things. If I can read what I've written here, I think Mr. Chairman has it right that there are probably 3 or 4 solutions to this problem, and that when you look at that menu, a lot of things are these different options are not mutually exclusive, and that it will require a performance-based plan, a multi-year plan. You know, yesterday I had a chat with another council member in this building who's not on this committee, and he said, Kerry, it basically comes down to, $25 to $50 million a year over 25 years, plus some 50-50 money, plus some federal and state money. We can piece it together. We can do it if we want to do it. And he said the question is whether the council and the mayor have the will to get this done. He also suggested creative ideas. Maybe we remove the exception for driveways and curbs, but not sidewalks, and really just focus like a laser beam on sidewalks. So just following on Mr. Chairman's point and the Bureau's point, I mean, there's a roadmap here if we want to do it. Whatever we can do as private citizens, in addition to being with LA Neighbors United, I'm a neighborhood council member. There were no neighborhood council members as part of the study group that brought us to this point. There are a number of neighborhood council members who are prepared to sit down and roll up their sleeves and help us solve the problem if you want our help. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you all. And our final 2 speakers are David Kissinger and David Hernandez.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, council members. David Kissinger with the South Bay Association of Realtors. I, in fact, actually did sit with a number of colleagues with the study group with city staff for a number of years, and grateful for the opportunity to work with staff in good faith on this ever since the motion was introduced almost. I have a question, and based on that, I have a question and a comment on today's staff report. My question is this. When we were sitting with the study group, and this is now more than a year ago, it was presented to us by staff regarding the matter of the exception. The presentation was, we were told that whatever we do, whatever the city of Los Angeles does with respect to sidewalk repair, we need to repeal the exception. Now, I'm not qualified as to whether that's true or not, or whether I agree or not, but that was the scenario that we were presented with. With that in mind, on the staff report today, I'm curious to see there are 7 options laid out. A number of them mention repealing the exemption, others do not. Options 4 through 7 are not clear. I'm not quite sure if that contemplates repealing the exemption or not. I would just might request a little bit more clarity as to whether that would be spelled out there. As you know, our industry is opposed to point of sale, option number 4. And with that in mind, we have also been working with staff to develop other kinds of solutions, things that our industry can help the city get to where it needs to go on a macro citywide level to reach its goals for fully repaired sidewalks. One item I'd like to, if I may, add, and if we perhaps we can call it option number 8, is the concept of, and this is whether or not the city council chooses to repeal the exemption. If there is any kind of, whether voluntary or required financing on the part of the property owner, could it be done on a ongoing, if you like, I've heard the term on-bill financing on a amortized basis paid down over property taxes. We believe there is authority that's statutory that may be granted to the city by the State and Highway Code, starting about Section 5610, and I would encourage you as council members and the city to spend a little bit more time exploring that option and including it as one of the choices for repair. Thank you.
Thank you. And just to address your one question, you are correct. Repealing the ordinance on liability is a separate decision as to where we get the revenue to fix sidewalks. So we could repeal and do 1, 2, 3, or not repeal and still do 1, 2, 3, but we have to think about, you know, the expense and cost and who bears the burden of that. So it's still open. It's all open.
Exactly. Thank you.
Good afternoon, committee members. David Hernandez, Valley Village. I think we all agree there is a problem. And whether it's the lawsuits, whether it's the public safety, especially the children and seniors, the problem exists. What we're here today is to talk about whose problem it is. And from, especially when Mr. Parks brought up how gracious this city has been since 1972 or 1973 to assume that liability, there's a double edge to that sword. And the other edge is that since 1973, the city has assumed the liability and the responsibility. And if this was an apartment building and it had the type of plumbing and it had the type of decay, then the city would be classified as a slumlord. And so when you look back over 30 years, and some of you have been sitting on this council more than 8 years, this isn't a problem that happened yesterday or last year or the year before that. This is a problem that existed in good financial times when the city had plenty of income coming in, and still you let it decay. There was more concern about the trees. There was less concern about the public safety and seniors. Now, this meeting today, I'm from the San Fernando Valley. Where are the representatives of the Northeast San Fernando Valley community groups? Why is there no one here giving testimony in Spanish? Where was the outreach to Sylmar and Pacoima and Sun Valley and Arleta and Panorama City and Van Nuys, some of the oldest communities in Los Angeles with some of the most severe conditions for public safety? Where was the outreach to the Latino community? How come there wasn't announcements on Univision and Telemundo that, you know, people talk about how much we care about our Hispanic community, that where was the outreach to them? Both of these issues have no fiscal impact report. Well, I'm here to tell you that there's going to be a grave fiscal impact to the individuals in those communities who are trying to hold on to their homes by their fingertips right now. So the decisions that you are going to make are going to have very wide ramifications. And it's not just Encino and Studio City and Toluca Lake and all these affluent communities that are here talking about it. You need to make sure that you reach out to those communities before you make any decision. Thank you.
Thank you. And as I open it up to my colleagues on questions and comments, I do want to point out on that last point, which was brought up by several public comments, in that the outreach, I don't think we're at a point yet to put out a proposal for the community to comment upon. We're still discussing, brainstorming, thinking about what we are going to put out to the community. So as soon as we come out with that, and hopefully this committee decides that in the next few months, couple of months, then we have something to go out to the community with that people could comment on. But we're not at that point yet. So there'll be much more outreach once we're ready to put a proposal out there. So any questions or comments from colleagues? We start out with Mr. Koretz and work our way down. That's okay? Yeah. Sorry, Tony.
Yeah, I think it's probably no secret that I'm not a big fan of putting this on the homeowner and property owner after we've maintain these sidewalks in such terrible condition, and after we've put the trees there that have broken up most of these sidewalks. There are a couple suggestions for ways we can handle this. I think more focus on using sidewalk grinders is a good idea. The city of West Hollywood, which if you ever walk in, you'll find virtually no bad sidewalks. You might occasionally find a slightly bad one, but very few. Part of it is that they do a lot of use of sidewalk grinding. So you will find a lot of spots that have used that. They don't look bad, and it's very inexpensive. The other suggestion that was made by one of the chambers of commerce, which I think we should look at, is reducing permit costs to nominal fees, allowing property owners to use their own contractors subject to meeting city guidelines on repairs, so that some of this will actually get done by people that want to do it, but can't get past the costs of the impediments that we put in their way. So just a couple thoughts. Other than that, I would like to go for item number 7 and leave things as they are.
Rosenthal?
I'd love to have you come on, Ron. First, I want to know more about the grinding concept that West Hollywood uses, how they do that. And obviously, I want to talk about roots and trees, among others.
The sidewalk grinders, basically, it's a walk-behind machine that actually can take off an eighth of an inch at a time on a pass, and it's really effective up to a uplift of about 3/4 of an inch. If you get much past that, then with only a 3-inch thick sidewalk, then you start compromising the integrity of the sidewalk. So an eighth of an inch at a time, you can grind that down to make it a level surface. Of course, it has a ground-down look to it. It's not pretty, but it's very safe. And again, we can do these. Can do a whole lot of locations. We can do them very quickly, and we do have that. The information from 06-07 where we did. I believe we were budgeted for 18,000 locations. I know we did a lot more than that.
When my colleague was mentioning about the simpleness of getting an estimate and getting somebody together and doing something yourself, how do we cut through the red tape to make that as the real option for a home?
The policy still exists, and I've confirmed this with the Bureau of Engineering as well as for our tree permits. And there was a council action from a motion from Councilman Cardenas several years ago as a pilot, and it's been extended until today, that if damage is caused to a sidewalk from street trees, any permit from the Bureau of Engineering to do the concrete work, as well as from the Bureau of Street Service for the tree work, is at no cost. So I know our permit's available online. I believe Bureau of Engineering's is as well, and that includes the cost for inspection, and that, again, exists today. So they're welcome to hire their own contractor, and they can pull those free permits and do the work themselves. Now, as several of the speakers mentioned, when we get in some conflicts where if the tree has to be inspected, and if the tree can be root pruned, sometimes we have to trim it, because you don't want to take out the leg and then have a heavy crown, so then you get a structural concern. So then there's the added expense of trimming the tree as well as trimming the root. A lot of folks want to remove the tree, but again, it's the Department of Public Works' policy to maintain healthy street trees. So that's where we get a little bit of a conflict. Otherwise, certainly that anyone can pull the free permits and do the sidewalk work and get the roots pruned today.
All right, back to the other issue that was mentioned about the actual sidewalk itself. Say you look at your sidewalk and you say, I want to get this taken care of. How quickly can the city assist them in that, and private estimates and individual people finding solutions on their own? How do we do that?
Right now, again, besides offering the free permits, we really don't have a service, I think, to refer to contractors or provide them estimates. It's really on them to get their contractor to get that, to get that information or to get those estimates and choose amongst the estimates on who they want to select. And it's really their cost to pay them, and the city really doesn't participate other than issuing the permits.
When the city issues a permit, though, afterwards, does the city come out and inspect it to see if it's done right, and so the person is comfortable with what happened?
Yes. That includes, again, there's no cost for all the inspection. Especially, there has to be a point where our arborists have to come out and make sure that the roots can be pruned safely, or if the tree has to be removed, that determination has to be made once the sidewalk is removed.
When you put out the 7 options, in your opinion, which 2 or 3 make the most sense in combination?
I knew you were going to ask me
I know we're
that.
the policymakers, but I'd love to hear your thoughts as to what makes the most sense.
And Mr. Weiss pointed out our conclusion. We said, today, we know our budget climate, we know the potential for getting new staff is next to nil. The most feasible we see is option 7, maybe with a grinding option, but we're falling short of recommending. We're not going to recommend that as the way to go. It really strictly is a policy decision. And I think we at the Bureau are really not comfortable recommending any one of these options, including number 7. So,
I mean, one of my thoughts was when Bill Robertson was out there, I really do believe presentations in a regional sense. I could pull together my 8 neighborhood councils that are very engaged in this issue. Believe me, every property owner cares about their sidewalk one way or the other. They feel a sense of relationship, obviously, to their sidewalk and to their trees and to everything else. What stops us from doing that kind of dramatic outreach? I'd be happy to pull my 8 neighborhood councils together. We have 2 of the leaders in my councils right here in the room, where we could put it out there for a healthy discussion among the community people so we can all buy into it. I'm a policymaker, but I respond to the energy that I get from my community people. Mr. Koretz's point, I think you used the word stupid at one point. That was about the whole idea of property owners assuming the responsibility. Well, somebody has to assume the responsibility. Mr. Parks is pretty clear about it's time for some way for us to bite the bullet and go forward with it. I mean, I personally sit on budget, we sit in closed session, and we award monies to this, that, and the other on situations that exist, in the real world outside of this room. So what about that, coming in, doing a dog and pony and with a presentation and slides and helping people appreciate all this and getting their input? Would that be helpful to you?
Councilman, in my opinion, in my opinion, Councilman Weezer hit the nail on the head. I mean, we talked about this, I believe, last April of 2010. We had the same discussion about outreach, and we were really at a loss on what to reach out with. I mean, we have the options, we built more options, but we're not sure what that dog and pony show or what that presentation would be at this point. We really, I think, are at the point where we really need to narrow down the recommended options and really have a smaller, group of options to go forward with, maybe with more detail. Right now, we don't have a lot of detail. Councilman Englander mentioned these are numbers on some of these options that are extremely rough and we're not confident with. So we really need to study 2 or 3 of these much more closely and have a lot more detail. Have funding needs, have staffing needs, maybe like you said, the list of contractors, how we can help homeowners, obtain a contractor and other help they need. But at this point, I don't know how effective it would be. It really is too big a laundry list still of options.
Thank you, Ron. Appreciate that.
Mr. Englander?
Yeah. Thank you. A few comments, thoughts, a couple suggestions, and maybe a question or two, if you will. Because sidewalks are absolutely critically important, and it's where the rubber meets the road, so to speak. And in looking at this, and I think you said it earlier, this is a policy decision. This is not a decision on trying to shift responsibility or liability. It's a policy decision. And I want to focus on that for a second, because if you look at historically what the city has done, and for the last 40 years, has said that it's a responsibility of the city. They've said they haven't had the full funding to do it, but it's a responsibility of the city. The city has acknowledged that time and time again, both on the record and with their actions. With their actions, not only by going after federal funds, by hiring staff and purchasing equipment to do it in-house, but by each member's actions individually as well over the years. And so it's been I think a responsibility everybody has known that, in fact, they wanted to assume. And so the question of shifting the liability, I think, first of all, is a legal one. According to the documents, it states here that we have roughly 2,000 related claims filed every year. That's in 200 lawsuits. If there are 200 lawsuits filed every year over the past 40 years, that's close to 8,000 lawsuits. And we typically, for the most part, but not always, settle out some of these if we have findings on the lawsuits. We end up paying. So we now have precedent. Precedent meaning we go back the last 40 years. Now, there's precedent before that where we didn't have the responsibility, but I would think that the courts would look at precedent being what we've done in the last 40 years is a little more relevant than what we did prior to that. Having said that, the question really is a legal one. If there's a legal policy decision to be made of shifting the responsibility to not back to the homeowner, but to the homeowner, because it hadn't been with the homeowner for 40 years. It hadn't been to the homeowner in my lifetime, to put things in perspective. So it was never my responsibility. I'm a property owner. So starting with that is, would the courts then recognize the fact that would some judge say, well, city council voted to put the responsibility on the property owners. We keep saying homeowners. It's really property owners, commercial as well. Property owners. So since they did that, never mind the fact that they assumed responsibility and liability. In fact, they had all these funding programs in place. But now that they're broke and there's no money and it's no longer their priority, they're going to put the responsibility on the homeowner, the property owner. And so therefore the property owner is the one that's going to have to pay for slip and fall or something like that. Well, the court's really in their right mind with certainty before we would even think about jumping off this cliff, do that. And we'd have to know the certainty. And have we met with the courts? Have we asked judges for their opinion on that? Has there been any case law in any other liability shifts back to other property owners? We'd have to know that. So these are legal decisions that we're going to have to know probably in closed session. So I'd like to get some report backs on what's happened historically in shifts in responsibility and liability when there's precedent set. Yes?
That was highly suspicious. Bill Rosenthal walked out.
That's right.
Came back in when it started. So you didn't touch anything out there on the wall or anything, did you, Bill?
PA system works. So I've got a question on the liability issue. My next question is, how many sidewalks does the city of Los Angeles, the county of Los Angeles, the state of California, and the federal government own in the city of LA? Let's start with the easy one. How many sidewalks does the city own?
The approximate number we have is 10,750 miles.
10,000 miles?
Yeah.
How many of those 10,000 miles, approximate number, need to be repaired or at a minimum grinded?
Based on some old estimates and extrapolations, probably 40% of that.
40%?
Yeah.
And those are old, so it's probably 50 or 60%.
Yeah,
let's just round
did.
it off. We'll compromise and say 50%. So we probably have, we're guessing on old numbers, at least 5,000 miles of city sidewalks that are needed repair that would be our responsibility.
I'm sorry, Councilman, are you asking about how much of the sidewalk is on property that's owned by the city versus
Correct.
property that's owned by someone else and all we have is the right of way?
That's including our proprietary departments.
Because I think your answer was...
Yeah, to clarify, that's in our right-of-way sidewalk easements. It's not on property. It's in our street right-of-way.
Let me be just crystal clear in the question, because this is a critical question. How many sidewalks would we be responsible for fixing, or should we be responsible for fixing that are in the city control, whether it's owned by or operated property by the City of Los Angeles, including the proprietary departments.
I'm sorry, thank you for clarifying. That's a
Those
different
were
question.
around,
The number I gave you was for public works and in public right-of-way, if you will. City property, city buildings.
those would be public right-of-way as well, correct?
Not what we consider not in public works' jurisdiction.
Some of them might, some of them may not. In any event, how many that we would be responsible for fixing? If we instituted a program right now that said that we're going to cite you for failure to fix it, how many would we be cited for in the city of LA? We have programs here. Here's the thing. Here's where I have an issue. I have a lot of issues with this. But we have a responsibility, not only as elected officials, but as a city. We have a responsibility to ensure that we're doing what we're telling other people to do, that we are living up to and adhering to the laws and the policies that we set forth. That's our first responsibility. We've got to do that, not just by example, by practice. It was Mr. Koretz and I that recently walked up to, I believe it was Mr. Koretz, it might have been Mr. Krikorian, there's two Pauls on the council, but we were both walking up to the Van Nuys City Hall to go to Van Nuys council meeting, and there was a gas-powered leaf blower on the steps of City Hall. It was you. A city worker, City of LA vest on, with a gas-powered leaf blower. Gas-powered leaf blowers were banned by the City of LA. When we passed the 2-day watering in the City of LA, we told everybody they shall not water. They will be cited. Call your neighbor against your neighbor to let them know what's going on. And then you drive down the street, and the first phone calls we got were the complaints of DWP, Rec and Parks, city property, City Hall, you name it, all the city properties for not adhering to the 2-day-a-week watering ordinance. So my question is, before we jump off a cliff here and tell everybody and instruct them that we're going to cite them under many of these options, how many sidewalks do we have in the city that we'd be responsible for fixing? And A, have we made an effort to do that? And B, if no, why not? Before you answer that, and I'm not sure if you have the answer, I've got another issue. The other issue is that just as a cursory check, literally right before walking in committee, I was curious to see in very, very recent history if any council members had gone out there to say, you know what, this is a city responsibility. We have sidewalks in our own district. We've got to find funding for to fix. Not this is the property owner, not this is your responsibility. So how many sidewalks, some on city property, some on private property, did council members go out there in the last, in the recent history and find funds, allocate funds to fix sidewalks in their own district? And just a cursory check, we found CD11, CD10, CD4, CD11, CD5, CD10, CD8, CD8, CD14, CD14. Now, and if I read off the amounts of money, $14,000, $200,000, $10,000, $283,000, $350,000, $750,000, $35,000, $1.1 million, that catches up to CD8, $3.8 million in CD14, $30,000 in 14, $1.5 million in CD11, $300,000 in CD11, $35,000 in CD12, $158,000 in CD12, $25,000 in CD4, $15,000 in CD4, $360,000 in CD10, $230,000 in CD10, grant funding that they sought as well, CD15, $51,000, another $19,000 in CD15, CD6, another $840,000. My point is, if the city, if individuals on the council have made it a priority to say, well, we just don't have the money, but we're going to seek it other ways because it's our responsibility to fix the sidewalks, then we truly need to make it a responsibility. This is just simply a budget question and a priority question. I want to say I totally and completely, 100% believe that Mr. Parks is correct in this. And he's been fighting for this, and he keeps saying for lack of action, if we do nothing, we truly do nothing, we walk away with never having a program to fix the sidewalks, unless we do something. And I absolutely agree. We have to do something, because option 7 and sticking our head in the sand is doing nothing. It's not going to happen. And we'll still continue to get the slip and falls, we'll still continue to get the lawsuits, but I don't think we fully explored all the opportunities. I think the true opportunity has to be in the city budget process to fund things, and it's going to hurt. There's going to be people coming back saying, well, what do you mean you're cutting this program? What do you mean you're not going to have this type of service? But it means starting in the right place for our responsibility, when I really feel we're never going to shift the liability back to the property owner. The other thing that wasn't explored in here, which I know that at the time Mr. Parks and Mr. Smith had brought up when this was first introduced, they had asked for the idea of a loan program similar to putting it on as a special assessment that was done, not the special assessment districts, but on individual property assessments on taxes. They'd asked for that to be explored as well, and that was not done. And then in the last comment is on the stakeholders meeting that was set up. It didn't appear that in the stakeholders meeting, I believe was first set up in 2008?
7.
In 10? 2007. That not all stakeholders were actually invited to attend that as well to come up with these solutions. So those are my quick comments on it. I think we got a lot of work to do, but I think we've got to just reprioritize our public works and infrastructure. I think the bond needs to be re-explored. That would be the critical one. I remember polling done after JJ was failed. I think it doesn't say here in the report. Let me ask you the question on the bond is what else was on the ballot with that bond?
Again, I don't know that much about it. My understanding was it was in response to the Americans with Disabilities Act, so curb ramps and sidewalk repairs, my understanding, were the two items. There might have been others, but that's what I'm aware of.
So on that, because it's stated on here that a bond is an option, however, last time we tried this, it failed. It doesn't tell the story.
That's true.
So,
right.
So if there are 5 other bonds and they all passed, if you did this, and also I think it's 80 or 90% of all city bonds for public works have passed by the voters. Did this bond have an oversight committee attached to it?
Don't know.
Which is almost required now by voters. They want to see independent oversight to ensure the money's being spent where it's spent and there's transparency. And every bond that the city's had that has had an oversight committee has passed in the council, has passed with the voters. In fact, the library bond, they built 2 additional libraries that weren't even part of the original bond because it was done on time and under budget. The same thing with the public safety bond as well, and they upgraded all the police stations. Not all of that was part of the original bond language. And so I think looking at some of the bond programs, that's critical. I'd like you to come back with more information about actually putting something together before the voters for a possible bond to look at a long-term infrastructure plan. The idea that if we had a bond, there's revenue anticipation programs where we can jump-start some of these. These are shovel-ready projects, not just sidewalks, but streets. And these are projects that would put massive amounts of people back to work immediately. And I think this is something that we ought to really, really focus on. So if we can report back on the ideas and not just saying, well, we tried a bond and it failed, because that doesn't tell the story. Who ran the bond program? Who ran the campaign? What did we do to try to run an effective campaign? Were the city leaders behind it? Was there an oversight program? What other bonds were on the ballot with it? There's a lot of reasons things fail,
Sure.
and there's a lot of reasons they succeed. So we've got to look at that. Thank you.
If I may add that we'll work with the CEO on that because, again, they probably have more history with it, and I know the folks that worked on it from our shop are no longer with it, so we're no longer with the Bureau, so we definitely need their expertise to help us out there.
Great. Excellent.
Mr. Parks? You know, one of the things I think, and that sounds like a recording from last time, we've just celebrated the 6th anniversary of the motion that came forward. We could sit here and ask a ton of questions, and all of these questions have been asked and answered over the last 6 years. We asked the question as to whether there's any problem with changing over the responsibility. City attorney has told us over and over, it's an ordinance. There was not an issue about changing just as we changed it the first time. I think the issue, the reason the city took over the sidewalks since 1970 for trees, it's clear that the community and the owners were not keeping them in pristine shape. And so we took that over for 2 to 3 years. Did not have the money. Since then, we've spent $100 million to build 500 miles of sidewalk. And they're in worse shape today than after the $100 million. And when we hear this conversation about the city putting in trees, anyone that monitors development knows the developer puts in trees, streets, and sidewalks to the greatest degree, and has been doing that since they've been developing the city. The city may put in trees periodically, but the bulk of the trees, sidewalk, and streets are put in by developers.
That's right.
And so that's without question. When we think about the grinding issue that we hear about, most of the sidewalks we have in the city, you need a dump truck to grind them. They're beyond grinding. And so we can look at that as a casual response, but it doesn't serve the problem of people walking a foot up off the ground and trying to get to the other side of the sidewalk. And so, again, we can keep finding reasons not to do it, and we should just say we don't want to do it. But to ask this litany of questions that are in the file that have been around for 6 years, I think it basically causes the general public to think we don't know what we're doing. And I think the other issue is when people talk about the real estate industry, in 2005, when the real estate industry was the height of its economic benefit, the same people showed up and said it's an impact negatively on the real estate industry. Right. So the issue is they don't want the process, and anybody that would tell you that it doesn't bring more value if your sidewalks are fixed around the house are misleading you. Anyone that's purchased a house would know that the sidewalks, the trees, and the surrounding area are an attraction, and the first thing you'd ask is who's responsible for them. It's like saying I'm going to sell a house with a bad sewer line. Yeah, it does have some material impact depending on what the outside view of the house is. And I think the issue on the bond, we can put another bond out. If 44% of the people voted for it last time, it makes no difference on what was on the ballot. People are not going to charge themselves for their sidewalks. We've seen that over and over. We saw the same thing happen when we asked them to charge themselves on the solar issue with DWP. These are all things that we can keep throwing it out there and find another year. We can say to ourselves, we are doing our job because we are giving ourselves another break, and maybe somebody else will be on these committees when it comes back. One of the things I think we failed to realize that this council created a franchise fee that gives every district a minimum of $90,000 a year to help them on their sidewalk repair. Now, whether they use it for that, it's up to their records to reflect how do they use their franchise fees. Again, the budget, everyone that says it's a budgetary problem, I want to see them in 12 and 13 sit down and cut police and fire and put an adequate program on sidewalks when 70% of the budget is on police and fire. I want to hear that conversation when we have not cut or stopped hiring police officers for the 8 years I've been on the budget. So we can say that today, but in reality, when the budget comes, the same things will get funded. 70% police and fire, you'll cut parks, you'll cut all those other things, and you'll cut additional we've already cut 5,000 civilian positions. We'll keep cutting them because we're addicted to people in uniform. So we can discuss that today and talk about all the things we're going to do in March and April next year, but the budget will look the same as it's looked the last 8 years. I think the issue is also this thing of the 10,000 miles of sidewalk. Again, whether it's 50% or 40% or whatever the percentages are, they are worse off today after spending $100 million over the last 10 years. And so we can still go back and say all of these things are going to work themselves out. We can keep kicking this can. We will never lose total responsibility for the liability because it's a right-of-way. And yes, the right-of-way, we will not let people have their own sidewalks. We won't let them go out and fix a fancy street. They're going to have to fix streets and sidewalks at the conditions that the city sets. But the city will never lose responsibility because it's a required right-of-way in the community. The other issue is that Our goal, I thought, was to try to find some way in which we can reduce the liability of the city and at least begin to look at a way to start fixing sidewalks in some fashion. A proposal to talk about where there's claims. We certainly would be remiss if we did not fix sidewalks after someone claims or gets a lawsuit. What we've been as remiss is that we constantly go put asphalt on a place we just spent $300,000 or $400,000 because somebody broke their shoulder or their head, and we continue to hope no one else falls over the same asphalt. Again, that's liability because we have constructive notice that this is now a problem. The city attorney can tell you how hard it is after constructive notice to say we're not responsible.
Very hard.
Pardon?
It's very hard to say.
It's very hard. So these are things that we have a choice, that we can come here and keep asking Mr. Olive to keep writing reports, because he has nothing else to do. Keep bringing these reports in. This is volume 16, 17, answer the same question, come back with the same photographs, and at the end say, I want to pick 7 because we don't have to do nothing, and then we move on. So the issue is, as a committee, we either have a choice to do something or keep misleading the public as it relates to what our responsibilities are. I have one of the poorest districts in the city. Not one person in my district doesn't want their sidewalks fixed, and not one of them are here saying it's too much of a burden, because they want their sidewalks fixed and they realize I can't fix them because we don't have the revenue. And so the issue is that we can keep talking about it. We can keep bringing up another set of questions. I can bring you another list next week. Mr. Olive, write me another report, and we'll sit here and stare at you and say, all right, we just wasted another 2 hours now. We'll see you in a month and waste another 2. So I think it's up to us, if we're going to do this, is to find a way to fix the sidewalks or just not have another committee meeting. So,
Thank you very much, Mr. Parks. And first, I want to give my 2 cents on where I am in my thinking about this solution. And then secondly, to speak to Mr. Parks' point, hopefully we will give some direction today to staff to drill down more on some of these options, then come back one more time, and then we direct you to go direct the city attorney's office to write the ordinance. So I hope we take action no matter what that is. From my point of view, I look at it, I think Mr. Parks mentioned he wanted to, get the revenue and then, shift the liability and then look for ways to find the revenue. I look at it, I'd rather try to find the revenue first and then shift the liability. That's kind of how I'm approaching this. And in order for us to do long-term and say when we may be ready in the future to shift the liability, I agree that we should go out for a bond again. We could also do assessment districts. Assessment districts, it's up to the local voters, local people. If we want to get together, just like a lighting district, let them tax themselves. That's what America's built on, democracy and providing for resources to do it. And also, a point of service and point of permit process, not a point of sale, but a point of service and point of permit, I think can make sense, because that will allow us to do more sidewalks. It's not fully shifting liability and responsibility, but it is also getting us to a point where we will make sure some more of our sidewalks are fixed, because whenever there is a service and you need to get your lights on, you need to put Picos out, and they already have a check off of things that need to happen before they switch that light on. Or if you have a permit that's above $20,000 that you're seeking to do work on your house, there's already a checkoff system on some things they check on to see if you've done, and this could be one of those. It's not really going fully shifting responsibility and liability, but I think it's a medium point that I'm willing to look at this point. That's where I am in my thinking, but what I hope to do, at least with the Public Works Committee, Mr. Chair, on Budget and Finance, is for my members, I would want to either go down each option and take a vote, or we could just throw out what we would like them to look at further and see if there's a majority either way on the options. And then I also want to take a vote at this time on whether we should shift liability or not. So at least we're clear from the Public Works Committee what direction we want to go.
Is this more of a straw poll or an actual vote to move to council? If I can get some clarity on
This
that.
would be, we could take it as a straw poll. All we're doing is giving direction to staff as to what we would like them to dig. They told me that they don't want to they could spend months now looking at each one of these in detail, but it takes a lot of time. So they want a little bit more direction from us, narrow down these choices, and then come back to us one more time before we actually take a vote. So today would be like a straw poll.
But, I think one of the things, in trying not to waste your time, this committee, over time, has changed the direction of this project at least a couple of times. And every time, they've come back with the reports. And so, at some point, we could take a straw poll in next month. We could say, thank you very much, and we still have another stack of papers. I don't know if we could ask any more questions.
Yeah. And if I could, and I agree with that, and I think everybody's frustrated because it's been so many years, and I think, with respect to the chair, I think you've got a really difficult thing in front of you as the chairman of this committee, because there's never been a true consensus, even really over the last 40 years, quite frankly. This has been going back and forth probably since 1911, since this was first enacted, and it's never an easy thing to grapple with. I think there were a lot of issues that and I'm not trying to push the bond, but the idea, I'm just looking at, just to throw this out there, the ballot that this was placed on, there was a zoo bond, there was a branch library bond, there were all kinds of other bonds that passed. This was the last item that was actually placed on the ballot, and it failed. On this bond, there was no polling before that I recall it going. That's what I recall, that it was put on the ballot without any real support from that perspective. It was only sidewalks and having to do with ADA, and a lot of people didn't even know what that meant. And then there wasn't much of a campaign around it. And that's, quite frankly, we all know we're all sitting here because of a political campaign. We all know how to run campaigns. We all know that if you put something on the ballot, you can't just walk away and go on vacation. You've got to go out to neighborhood councils and outreach. You've got to go to editorial boards. You've got to go meet with folks. You've got to get people behind it. First, we've got to find out if there's a consensus that if people want the streets and trees and sidewalks and things like that fixed, even if it were over a 30-year bond, and not to quadruple the city's debt, but how many people that would put back to work and how little that would cost each individual person in the city over that kind of time, but bring up the quality of life throughout the city. I think Mr. Parks mentioned his district is the worst. And it's not right. It's not fair that council members work so hard, and their staff and public works and so many city folks spinning the wheels year after year, and then all the volunteers on neighborhood councils and community-based organizations and everybody that's frustrated. And then by just happenstance, this person who really cares about public works and asked to be the chair of the committee, who wants to take this on head first, has to deal with all these reports and not having a real solution right in front of them. I think we've got to go out and find out if there's a consensus on what people want to see. It was stated earlier that, no, we shouldn't spin our wheels because it hasn't been flushed out. Well, oftentimes when something's flushed out, then it's a matter of going out to stakeholders and saying, well, we don't have another option. We're just sharing this with you, but we want your opinion. Well, that's not asking for their opinion. That's selling them a bridge. And I think they're too savvy for that. I think what we've got to do is say, here are the 7 options. Here's what we've come up with. But flush them out a little more, particularly on the bond one that doesn't just refer to one that failed, but how about all the successes that have passed? How about all the great successes that we've done in the city with a lot of these initiatives where we've spent less money than what they passed. It afforded us to do more with less, on time and under budget, talking about some of those things, because we need to get this done. So.
Okay. Is Carnes staff here? Is the councilman coming back?
Because he has a recommendation.
Okay. Do you know when he's going to come back? No? Okay, thank you. At least from the Public Works Committee, why don't we go through the options and see if we want to ask staff to further examine those as a straw poll. And so we know that there's just some options. They're really, the options there, well, you have them listed as number 4, point of sale, point of service, point of permit. We could pull those out individually or keep them together.
Councilman, we have a 4A, 4B, 4C, I think.
Oh, I see, 4A, 4B, 4, I see, okay. And then we have number 5, which is sidewalk repair assessment district and bonds. And all this will do is, although they have looked into some of these more in-depthly, I mean, it wouldn't take much to come back in 30 days with, even on the bonds, for example, that's saying, hey, go look at this, we want to do a bond. And if there's going to be other bonds, people talking about something else, you know, we talk to other people around the city family, hey, what are you guys working on? You guys thinking of doing something else? We might combine them or think about, we have to have the analysis as to whether we're overburdening the property owners, et cetera. We need all that information so that we come back in 30 days, we say, yes, is it go or not? Because there's some very preliminary information we need. We may look at all the last 4 LUSD bonds, the community college bonds, everything else, and say, wait a minute, we don't want to overburden the property owners any more than we already have, and we may step back from that when we come back with this. But we need that work done before I think we make that final decision. And I do want to,
Can I make one amendment to that? Sure. I would say that we've been grappling this for a long time. And if I can make a friendly amendment to that suggestion is to not come back in 30 days, but to come back at a time appropriate where you've actually went out and met with the stakeholders and the public, or you've gone out to take their temperature and get their input. You know, just this morning, we passed a 10-year unanimous vote, a 10-year sanitation charge increase for major infrastructure, and the cost and the investment on that infrastructure is about what we're talking here. With that, they met with 70. They had 70 was pretty incredible public meetings around the city of Los Angeles, going to work with stakeholders, coming up with different analysis. It ended up, what we voted on today, by the way, was different than what they started off with prior to the 70. There was negotiation. They looked at, in fact, just even in this committee, this last week it was tweaked once again that said, how can we up front invest more in the infrastructure in the first couple years, even though we're going to be increasing the percentage on the fee on the last 2 years? And they said, that's a great idea. We can do some revenue anticipation, although we don't always like to do those. It costs money. But to put people back to work and get some of the infrastructure started now, that was the idea. And so I would ask that they come back, not in 30 days, but maybe in 6 months. And I'm not trying to kick the can down the sidewalk. The idea is, you take that time, go out and actually, or come back here in 30 days with a report of what you're going to do for outreach, to who you're going to bring in. Is there a consultant? Is there somebody we can bring in that can spearhead an outreach effort? Is there somebody that can go and organize and go meet with?
Well, let's do that. We'll be back in 30 days with some very preliminary information, but also with an outreach plan to go out. Not only the bond, but all the other options that we're asking you to look at. So in 30 days, we'll be back here with some preliminary information from you. We just have some paragraphs right now on these options, but what does that look like? Stacking plans, budget, everything else. And then you go out and do the community outreach before we do the final council vote. So let's start off with the bond. Straw poll. Okay to move.
I don't know what to say yes or no to it until, again, on any of these items, until they come back with all that stakeholder input. So
all right.
I don't know if that there's a yes or no type.
All right.
But if you're looking
move
for
forward.
discussion,
There was some interest to move forward with the bonds. So at least from the Public Works Committee.
Well, I don't have a problem with the bonds. I think a local assessment is more reasonable that people believe they're fixing their own sidewalks. I think the bond takes you into the issue of people believing they're fixing other people's sidewalks, and I don't know quite how that works. And so I think the assessment, just like people pay for their own lights, things like that, they're more apt to do that. But again, that gives them a pathway. If they choose not to vote for them, they also choose not to have sidewalks.
Yeah. Can you look at both those issues? Look at both. We're coming back in 30 days. Local assessment, bonds.
Yeah, assessment, I think.
How about point of sale?
I think for all of them.
Yeah.
That's
Sorry.
Point of sale?
Whatever.
local assessments and bonds, 30 days. look into those further, dig deep, feasibility, all that good stuff. Now, on 4A, 4B, and 4C,
That was waiting for Carter. He's got it.
point of sale,
I didn't want to expose his idea.
I like A, B, and C.
Yeah, I think all three of those are.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I misspoke earlier. They're actually 4A, 4B, 4C are a little different.
yeah.
They could be applied to any one of those. So they have to be separated, you're right.
You on point of sale?
Yeah, point of sale, point of service, or point of permit.
I think all three.
I can honestly say that I wouldn't want to see any of those three come back. I think the point was made earlier that even in good financial times, I mean, this has a direct impact on home sales and closing escrow, and we rely on that in the city greatly. And we have a lot of properties that are in foreclosure or short sales, and there's never been a clear explanation on what would happen with those either.
So far, the district, you have the bond. On these three, on point of sale, point of service, and point of permit, what I'm hearing is, on discussion and straw, Ms. Dengler is no and any. Mr. Parks is for all of them. I'm for point of service and point of permit. So, at this, go ahead,
I was
Mr.
just going to
Parks.
say, on the 50/50, I don't think you should even get close to that, because the only people that don't have the 50 is the city, so you might as well leave that one in.
My district never used 50/50, although we advertised it like crazy. So far from the Public Works Committee, you have point of service and point of permit as two possibilities. Point of sale doesn't have two votes. So, at least from Public
Point of
Works.
sale in there?
Well, it's budget and finance. You guys take your straw votes right now?
Public Works.
Yeah, we have point of service and point of permit. So that's our suggestions. Come back in 30 days with those. And Mr. Parks, if you want to give direction based on your...
On that, let me just ask Budget and Finance Committee on the point of sale, well, let's go one at a time. Point of sale?
Yes.
No.
Yes.
No.
2-2. Let's go point of service? Yes.
No.
No.
Okay, 2 and 2. And point of permit? Yes.
Yes.
No.
No.
Okay, 2 and 2. Okay. So,
How about assessment?
So...
Eric, you're getting all this, right, Eric?
We did we did assessment, so that's already.
Let me ask the Budget and Finance on assessment?
Yes.
Oh, this is,
Assessment.
assessment is if they special assess themselves, the
Yeah,
district?
yeah.
I'd support that.
Support that.
Mr. Britt?
I'll support it, although I don't think it'll ever happen.
All right, that's four of us.
Yeah, that's okay, it's 4.
We get special lighting at districts every day in the city. People vote them, you know.
And the bond on your end, Mr. Parks?
I could go with the bond, but I think the assessment is better. I can.
I think we explore both
I'll
of
go
them.
with the bond, too. If it's worded properly, that helps people appreciate.
We got a lot of time to work on that. Yeah.
So what do you have, Mr. Fritz, on bond?
I'll vote for that. Again, I don't think it'll ever work out, but I'll vote.
We got 4 for the bond, we got 4 for what?
4 for the assessment.
Yeah. So, and you were tie on the others. So what you have as direction as a joint committee is bond, assessment districts, point of service, and point of permits. When you come back, I would ask that you suggest to us, how do all of those look together, right? I mean, because there's an impact that would have, let's say we adopt all of them, and if we adopt one or not the other, do some of them conflict, et cetera? So all that stuff needs to be brought forward, but at least we narrowed it down to you so that in 30 days, we have a more comprehensive report, and then we're going to direct from there either to council to have an ordinance. Is that, or to move forward with those 4? If we so choose at that time, we'll take a real vote in 30 days.
Okay. What about the ordinance?
You do have the, yeah, the ordinance. On the Public Works, do we, I forgot about, thanks, repeal the exception?
Yes.
No, 2 noes, 1 yes on Public Works.
Okay, Budget Finance, repeal?
It's too premature. We figured that out yet.
Okay. Mr. Brett?
No.
Mitch?
No.
It's 2-2 on the repeal, so
So no repeal at this time.
what do we do on 2-2? You can send it forward for the council.
Okay.
Okay, so 30 days, more detail on those 4. The outreach component, did you want to report back also on what that's going to take?
Yes, I'd like
Again,
to know, I want my community
okay.
involved in this process.
We'll work with the Bureau of Sanitation to see what they did on the sewer service charge, because, again, we have no expertise or no
also
experience
means
with that, so we'll have to
Working
gather.
with CAO and
Yeah,
all
yeah.
the other entities and people who have worked with putting city bonds forward, what that would look like, what does it mean, all that good stuff, so we can get that ball rolling.
If I could, I would suggest that we keep we took the straw poll vote, and we did the same thing on the appeal, not an official vote to move anything to council, as we stated before we were going through the instruction on all those, that I would suggest we, since we have all these coming back, and we're talking about putting a comprehensive outreach program on the table as well, that we hold that back until we have such outreach done and complete, because that's critical, and so we don't piecemeal this. We've come too far and taken too long to take just some actions, and so I would suggest that to the chair.
I have one request too, is that, could you just give us an idea if the city were to go back to its inspection and permit program? What are we talking about in numbers and dollars, that if we were to consider that in the 12-13 budget?
Councilman, it would really depend on which one of those sub-options, how long a term we wanted to do it over.
Because I think if you look at the motion, the crux of the motion was initially, was that the city take on the role of inspection and permit, and that the work be done by private contractors, creating jobs and funds in the community. So the key is the inspection and the permit process for the city. If we can look back in times past, give us an idea how many people and how much money.
Okay, we'll do that.
And so we see you back in 30 days with more in-depth analysis on those 4 options. And on the repeal piece, at least in Public Works, it was a 2-to-1 vote no. It was a tie for Budget and Finance. So depending on how we word it for the full council, that's still a possibility to punt it to council when we forward the whole item to full council.
So move the orders to council based with those reports.
Yes.
Any chance we get a little more time? 30 days? It's a lot.
45 days? 60 days?
We'll take what we can get.
I think they're going to use 60 days, they're going to do that outreach.
Yeah.
60 days, 60
Thank you.
days.
Let's make sure Mr. Allen and the Palisades gets involved.
Okay, we have one public comment, Dr. Tom Williams, public general comment. Is he here? Not here? Okay, that adjourns this meeting.
Thank you.